So it's probably still the same people doing similar stuff, or maybe not. I have no idea. Maybe just nobody makes cartoons anymore. Maybe not in America. Just that One Piece.
Taita Quiero you. What? I love One Piece.
Boku no Pico Academia.
Is that still a thing that like people tell to each other to watch?
Demon Slayer. What? Boku no Pico?
Yeah.
I don't know, but they should though. You heard it here first. Except definitely not first. But you should watch it. Watch Boku no Pico. Are we even recording?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
We've been going for a while.
Cool. That's how you know it was off the cuff. That's how you know it was real. That's how you know I really think you should watch Boku no Pico. All right, so today we're talking about Danger, Diabolik from 1968. I like that it's not just called Diabolik. It's called Danger, Diabolik, exclamation point. Based on a comic from the 60s, right?
Yes, an Italian pulp comic by the same, well, not by the same
name.
It's just Diabolik.
Diabolik.
Written by a pair of sisters, Angela and Luciana Giussani. Giussani?
Mm-hmm. They seem very interesting, very creative.
Yeah. It has over 900 volumes. This was printed originally as a trade magazine. So that's like around like this size. Think of it like a DVD case, actually.
Right.
Usually 10 to 20 pages. If it's 20, I think that's like a double size. Ads make it a little bit longer, but this is black and white. It's essentially very cheap to make and very easy to like produce, but like still there's still a like individual cost, I guess.
I heard that they had found a copy of Fantomas on a train, and that they were inspired to try and come up with something that was good train reading.
So in my research, I also found that like, the inspiration for Diabolik was also Fantomas, which I think is very interesting because
explain what Fantomas is though, because I barely know what Fantomas is.
So Fantomas is a French kind of noir character written, I can't remember the exact term, but it is essentially trade magazines. These aren't necessarily comics. They were later turned into comics or adapted into comic book form.
Oh, okay. So he was like a serial character.
Yeah. Think like American pulp fictions before the comic book boom of the late 20s, early 30s. Like this is like a
detective fiction kind of stuff.
But instead of it being a detective, Fantomas is a serial killer. He's like a gentleman serial killer and kind of terrorizes France. And
what a great hero. He seems like a precursor to like Anthony Hopkins, Silence of the Lambs.
So this is kind of an interesting bit of like comic book history, because there's actually a genuine argumentation to which is the first graphic novel.
Okay.
Some comic book historians will cite Italy in the early or late 1800s for producing some of the earliest graphic novel works. But then that, like, I believe by that classification, you're like stretching the definition of graphic novel. Other people, especially I think French comic book enthusiasts and French comic book historians, argue that characters such as like Fantomas, like in their later like comic book adaptations, are some of the more early graphic novel characters, because they have a self-contained miniseries essentially,
okay.
which is like kind of a moniker of modern day graphic novels.
Right.
It's intended for like a start and finish. And then there's obviously the American comic book community that argues that we invented graphic novels. But if you really want to argue it, the earliest graphic novels in like the American conceit don't really show up until I think the 60s and the 70s.
Which ones are the earliest American ones?
So I can't really remember exactly what the titles are, but it's like they were part of what was known as the underground comics movement.
Okay.
Comics with an X. This is
okay.
this is during like the period of time that America was under something known as the Comic Code Authority,
Right.
which is a pretty big deal, especially for you know.
Well, I remember some of that stuff's like pretty degenerate, actually. Some of that stuff, like
Yeah, because it was very much reactionary to the establishment of the Comics Code Authority, because they're like, oh, you're literally censoring our work, so we're just going to take it to the next extreme. Like Fritz the Cat is an example of underground comics.
Yeah. But I remember even some stuff was like very, very sexual, like almost outrightly pornographic,
and
like weird,
exploitative,
yeah, like
psychedelic. Yeah,
but like lots of like Nazi stuff and like white supremacy stuff in it too.
Yeah, that was also like a kind of undercurrent of the like underground comics movement, which was like, it's a hard pill to swallow, but yeah, that's an unfortunate like matter of fact of the history of it all, because like
I'm not putting a positive or negative spin on it. I'm just putting it out where it is.
That's just like look, Sex Pistols, right? And if you look at the history, like underground comics, there's I think it was like centered around like maybe like New York, really. And I can't remember which borough exactly. I think it might have been Greenwich, but there is like an undercurrent of like neo-Nazi movements that like have pocketed around there, especially during like the 60s and the 70s, where like they're so removed, or they think they're so removed from World War II, that like this is almost like a edgy ideology.
Well, I mean, like in general, like post World War II, like American confidence, I think resulted in like a desensitization from that kind of stuff. I mean, like you said, like the Sex Pistols, like I mean, punk rock and new wave music are like full of like
pseudo-fascistic.
Just references, like, or just taking Nazi imagery and just like twisting it or fucking with it or messing with it. In like in this fetishistic kind of way, yeah.
Which I mean, like, that doesn't make it bad inherently. Necessarily.
Yeah, I think it depends on
like what you're producing.
Each project, to themselves.
Right. There's a difference between like an inherently white supremacist or white nationalist piece of material and propaganda versus something that is taking the visuals, the imagery, and like the I guess like the narrative framework of these fascistic organizations, and using that as like a narrative construct. Because then like I think that's like, you get something like Starship Troopers, where it uses the framework of fascism and sells it to you, and then you're kind of convinced, but then you realize, wait, I'm reading something that's incredibly fascist.
Yeah. But I think also a lot of people just use it as like Sid Vicious was Jewish, right? But he used to like walk around wearing like a T-shirt with like swastika on it.
Yeah,
like,
and then he wears an armband.
Like I think he thought it was being like funny and ironic, and he was drawing a lot of attention, and all of those things were like part of like the snide kind of like impish personality of punk rock, right? Was like doing things because they might be offensive, like walking around in bondage gear in public and stuff like that.
But also, I think that's just like a I mean, like,
there's an element I think where those comics were also chasing that same.
But
high.
I also think that's just a fractional element of what punk rock is as well, because the greater idea of punk rock itself is also rooted in this kind of idea of anti-establishment. I mean, like, I feel like we're getting kind of off topic as well, but like, you got extremes of punk rock. Let's just say that, right?
Sure.
On one side, you got like the Sex Pistols, which is like, they kind of lean into like the fascism a little too hard, and the neo-Nazi right-wing extremist ideology is a little too hard there. And then like you got the other side, which I mean like.
But I get the Sex Pistols didn't actually care about ideology. They were like having fun with the ideas of ideology. Yeah, but they were like. But
then like you get like Frank Zappa on the other end.
Okay.
I would argue
Frank Zappa's not punk rock though.
I would argue he kind of is punk rock, dude. He's got it in there. Sure. Or like the Clash.
I'd say, but that's just like saying everything anti-establishment is punk rock, and that's like not
okay. Fine,
really.
Like the Clash.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't care about that stuff really at all.
I mean,
they would get like super.
I guess real punk rock wouldn't care about the ideological label of punk.
Yeah, but like also like just trying to establish like what is a real punk rock is like
so arbitrary.
Yeah,
we got really sidetracked by this arbitrary.
Anyways, Fantomas is cool.
Anyways, so Fantomas was created by hopefully I pronounced this right. Marcel Alain and Pierre Sylvester. I'll just write it out when I edit this. But Fantomas is kind of like a later like extreme of like French crime noir thriller literature, inspired by like characters like Arsène Lupin, which are kind of like the earlier iterations of French crime literature. Because like Arsène Lupin is the gentleman thief, right?
Right. And Arsène Lupin was a serialized character as well.
Absolutely. And I would argue Arsène Lupin is probably more famous than Fantomas. Like Fantomas, I would argue, is like a niche character, whereas the individuals that created him, Marcel Alain and Pierre Sylvester, are more credited for their greater contributions to French comic books and French literature as a whole, rather than like the individual character that they created. Whereas like Arsène Lupin as a concept, like the gentleman thief concept, is constantly recycled over and over and over again. Like I think
in particular, I will say that the Diabolik reminds me tremendously of Arsène, like Lupin the Third,
right?
You know, so there's like certainly like
you were mentioning it before, like how many parallels, like coincidental.
There's a lot of
parallels
parallels.
There seems to be.
There's a lot of parallels between the two. But if they're like part of a similar like family of concepts and ideas, it kind of makes sense. But there's like a lot of like you know, in this movie, like there's a scene where he like scales a castle wall to like steal like a very valuable necklace. It feels like it's something from like Castle of Cagliostro. It feels like something from
the car chase.
Right, exactly. The car chases too.
Yeah.
Like switching, like driving into a tunnel, switching to another car, and then launching another one off a cliff.
This is a pretty Lupin thing.
It feels very Lupin. Yeah.
But Diabolik as a character is also. Oh, excuse me, little hiccup.
Yeah, Diabolik, you know, is the central character of this film, and he's the Lupin kind of character, and
he's like kind of just a bad guy Lupin, honestly.
He's really quite bad, because he just like kills people with he's really good at throwing knives, and he just kills all these guards.
Throats.
Yeah, he's like slitting people's throats, and he kills a lot of people, and he blows up a government building. He commits like a pretty big terrorism.
An actual act of terrorism.
He commits a pretty big act of terrorism. And by the end of this movie, it's pretty crazy. It's almost like, has he stolen all of the money in this country in one way or the other? Yeah, exactly. Well, no, it is. It's broke. That's why they had to melt all the gold.
So
let's just cover the plot of this movie first, and then we start break down like the fact that he probably stole all of the money from this country. This country doesn't have any money because this guy took all of it.
So clearly,
This is like the least Robin Hood ever.
So clearly, you remember more about the plot than I do.
The gross domestic product of this country is like 0 now because this guy went ham. But also, they have some like the worst ideas possible about how to solve it. By the way, Mystery Science Theater 3000 covered this film as its very, very, very last. Their very last episode is this movie. I did not know that until after we had decided to see this. But now, and I've never seen that episode. I love that show. I've never seen that episode. I will be very excited to go back and see if they thought some of the things that I think about this movie. But what's really crazy also is in 2008, Empire decided this movie was one of the 500 greatest films ever made.
Which I think is interesting.
I think it's interesting to say the least. I had fun with it. I really like 60s like spy movie kind of stuff. Like I love Sean Connery Bond movies.
It's like this is like the Euro spy movie. I feel like there's every like trope for you can imagine.
But I'm impressed with what they did with what they had too, because I do think it's like actually like a pretty showy movie for what it seems like the budget was. And supposedly Mario Bava, who directed it under budget, which is also impressive.
I applaud.
Yeah. And supposedly, you know, he had been making these giallo Italian horror films before, and he used some of the strategies the cost-saving measures he had learned making those films, working on this one.
Which is just, that's just smart filmmaking.
Yeah, really pretty impressive.
Which, I thought this movie would have been crazy expensive, but learning that it came in under budget is very impressive for what they're able to accomplish and what they're able to like show on screen. And the stunt work that they're doing, essentially, especially for the 60s. I got a lot of Batman 66 vibes from it.
Definitely.
Especially with, like, I don't know if you're familiar with the Batutsi Batman.
What's the Batutsi Batman?
So in Batman, there's an episode of Batman 66 where they break into a dance number.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I remember him doing the like.
Yeah. So
like,
that I
supposedly the dances from Pulp Fiction are based on those, actually.
Yeah. So it's coined as the Batutsi Batman dance, I think, in the fandom. But with all the music that's going on, I kind of half expected some of them to break into dance at some point.
Well, there's a nightclub sequence, and neither Diabolik or his his girlfriend character Ava are there for that. But it's like very it's so weird because it's like a '60s idea of what a nightclub is like.
Also,
so there's
like,
like dance music playing, but they're all like sitting there playing guitar.
And this one lady is walking around, and she has like these weird things draped over here. And I looked at the bottom of what was hanging. It's little bottles of, I think, alcohol.
Yeah.
I'm like, how does this outfit work?
I don't know. I thought it was really charming and weird. And it turns out the whole place is like a front for this one drug lord's like narcotics operation.
Yeah.
And then he thinks that he's far enough out to sea that he can't be arrested because he's like in international waters.
Didn't he say he's like only 3 miles out? Or something like
Who knows? But then the Zenigata character, what's his name in this?
Inspector Jinko.
So like the three most important characters in the story are Diabolik, Ava, his girlfriend, Ava Kant, Emmanuel Kant's great granddaughter, obviously, and Jinko, which is spelled with a G for some reason. I don't know. Who knows? But anyways, these three characters are basically like playing this like cat and mouse game. There's a bunch of like hapless like politicians who keep like either getting fired or getting like they're changed their positions around.
The Minister of Finance keeps changing out who's ever chief of something. Or
Exactly.
Whatever.
Yeah. But they're all just getting they're constantly having their plans disrupted by Diabolik. But anyway, so yeah, this drug lord whose name is, what's the drug lord's name?
Ralph Valmont. He's played by this guy named Adolfo Celli, who is a Sicilian actor who is known for is credited in over 100 film appearances, which I think that's just a. To be fair, he's not the only one in the cast that has over 100 film credits either.
Well, we were just noticing before we even started recording, like how many people in this movie are in other movies together. So this movie was produced alongside Barbarella.
Yes.
So like Dino De Laurentiis was like trying to make these.
Oh yeah, this is a Dino De Laurentiis production.
Right. So he's trying to make these comic book adaptations, and these two are being made together. And the star of this film, the guy who plays Diabolik,
John Philip Law,
is also the secondary main character in
Jane Fonda's Barbarella.
Right, exactly.
He's also a brown-faced Sinbad in The Golden Voyage of Sinbad from 1973, which the only reason I know this is because as a kid growing up, we had a VHS that was like a 3-in-1 thing of like the Arabian Nights or something like that. So like we had one Sinbad movie and then like one other, I can't remember what it was, but it was like another Arabian Nights movie. But the third one wouldn't play because the tape was really fucked up.
But wait, was one of them him?
Yeah, the first one.
Okay.
Yeah, that was like the best running one essentially.
Okay.
But John Philip Law also credited in over 100 film appearances, which is just, that's kind of crazy.
I think it's funny because I don't hear people talk about him very much, but he was like clearly like a bit of a movie star in his era.
All these westerns too, which
spaghetti westerns too, like cool ones, like with Lee Van Cleef.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, why is no one talking about it?
I don't know. People don't know. I don't know.
Maybe we're missing on something. Maybe we're missing something.
Yeah, it's true.
Playing opposite him is Michelle Mel, who plays Ava Kant. Michelle Mel,
and she's really cool.
Marisa Mel, not Michelle. Marisa Mel, who is an Austrian actress who got typecast as femme fatale characters throughout her entire European art house genre career.
Right.
But
she is really cool though, and she's really pretty.
You have an more interesting story behind Ava's character.
So she was originally cast to be Catherine Deneuve, and I'm like the biggest Catherine Deneuve fan. I think Catherine Deneuve is one of like the most visually like interesting people who's ever lived. Many of like her biggest and best movies are some of my favorite movies. Indochine, Belle de Jour, like The Hunger, like some of like my favorite movies of all time. I'm like a really, really big fan of hers. And she had actually been cast to be in this film, and they filmed for about a week before they fired her and let her go. And they gave like a list of reasons. Every person had like a different list of reasons for like why this didn't work out. And from like one source, it's like, oh well, she just like, she wasn't ready yet. Like Belle de Jour hadn't come out, she hadn't done that yet. She just wasn't ready. Another story was that like she was too cold and too icy and like too hot, and the character of Ava is supposed to be really in love with Diabolik and not the other way around, and the vibe was like thrown off by her. But what I also heard was that, so in the earliest parts of the movie, they steal a bunch of money, and then he goes to put the money in a safe, and he looks at the safe, and he looks at the money, looks at the safe, looks at the money, and then like the scene cuts, and the money is like all over their like secret lair, and they have like this crazy
rotating couch.
Yeah, bed couch. It's like a super bed.
Not just that, but it's like multi-level too.
Exactly. it looks sick, actually. Like the lair looks cool, and then they're like having sex in the money. So he had like thought about putting the money away.
In the money.
Yeah, they're buried in the money, and they're like banging in the money. And I guess she had like refused to be naked in that scene, and I don't know how they got that far along to making the movie, and maybe they were just this fast and loose making movies in the 60s or whatever, where you wouldn't know whether or not someone was willing to be naked in the movie until you started making the movie. But I guess she had refused to do that, and then obviously she was canned. And what I think is really interesting about that is Catherine Deneuve is actually pretty famous for being one of like the most like outspoken, like ardent, like opponents to the Me Too movement. Actually, in like a couple of years ago, I think in like 2018 or something like that, she and like almost like 100 other French female film workers, like writers, actresses, filmmakers of all different jobs and positions, wrote like an open letter basically condemning the way that they thought that the Me Too movement had like gone too far. And so if she had actually been fired for refusing to be naked in this scene in the movie, I think that's a really interesting.
I think it's important to make the distinction that she's not undermining any of the victims or like the stories of the victims, but more of the as you put it, the Puritan witch hunt that became of it.
Yeah, I mean, she, I think that she felt like the part that I think that she objected to was like a puritanical. She felt like a spirit of puritanical culture, like a sex negative kind of culture that was like coming out of the Me Too movement. I don't want to speak for her. Anybody who's curious about this is like welcome to read the open letter that they wrote.
America has historically been sex negative.
Sure, definitely. She's not wrong about that part.
Like, I think that's just a general observation.
It's just true.
It's just America.
It's just true.
Historically sex negative.
For sure. And I do think, I personally have a problem with the fact that sex, especially in Hollywood movies, is almost exclusively depicted in a negative light. Like you almost never even see sex in movies anymore unless someone's being assaulted. Like that's the sequence in which you see.
Or the sexual encounter itself is some kind of illicit affair.
Exactly. There's something negative about it.
Yeah, it's always a framework in itself that sex is bad.
There's something shameful about it in some regard. And so if that's what her objection is, I don't necessarily disagree with her, but I also don't want to speak for her, and I don't feel like I should be personally accountable for whatever her opinions are. I'm a big fan of hers. I think that she's one of the greatest film actresses of all time.
How do you take like a sex negative society and try to shift it to a much more sex positive lens through film in the studio system?
No, totally. But it's not just the studio system either. Like I saw, I see comments all the time. They're just like wildly sex negative comments on the internet, like on Reddit or whatever. Someone will be talking about how they can't get laid, or how they can't find people to date, or how they're failing, sexually. And another person will be like, well, at least you're not contributing to all the STDs out there. And it's just like, what the fuck kind of way to look at
such like incel shit.
Yeah,
what
exactly.
It's
such fucking negative, pessimistic fucking like, you know what, we should just never have sex again. Fuck that. Fuck having kids. Fuck proliferating the human species. Let's just never do it again. Throw the baby out with the bathwater. Anyways,
these guys watched True Detective and listened to Matthew McConaughey and then got the wrong message. They latched onto his whole.
That's the thing, though. I'm not convinced it's just men. I think that the sex negativity of our culture is pervasive on both.
Just as there's incels, there's definitely femcels.
For sure.
And like all of them watch True Detective. They listen. They listen to Matthew McConaughey go. You know, the human race. I believe that we are on the brink of extinction, and we should all go out together and choose to no longer reproduce or something. Well,
time is a flat circle, guys.
Time is a flat circle. The whole point is that he's wrong. Matthew McConaughey is wrong.
By the end of the movie, he's just like. It's not a movie. I don't know why I said that.
Like, oh my god, the whole point of True Detective is because they're bad fucking the bad cops. Like, they're bad people.
They're not great cops.
Like,
they're not great cops.
They're shitty.
They are good friends, though. By the end of the show, they are pretty good friends.
No, I wouldn't even consider them friends. They're just
they're
indebted
cool
to each other.
No, they like push each other around in their little wheelchairs and stuff.
They're just people that have known each other for too long.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Their chemistry is so good.
One of these days we're gonna talk about all of True Detective, and I'm
down to talk about True Detective
because like I love that show. Don't get me wrong, I love that show, but I hate like the people are like, oh, Matthew McConaughey's character being like, time is flat circle. That's like he's so right. Blah 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 blah. It's like. It's only that way if you don't want things to change.
I also don't think Pizzoletto. Yeah, right. The writers don't. I don't think the writer. I don't know. It's really interesting. I think a lot of people like you can write things and people will. You know what I mean? Like you write these incredible things and you set these incredible expectations for people, and for the most part, they'll meet you like wherever you are, right? But there are going to be a certain percentage of people who are going to walk away being like, Patrick Bateman is a cool guy.
Oh my god.
They're just like,
Tyler Durden was on
exactly, yeah. Tyler Durden. You know what I mean? Like, Jordan Belfort was a good dude, Like, I love that movie, There Will Be Blood, because it really shows how you can just make the world your own.
But back to Diabolik.
Diabolik's pretty cool. He's actually, I feel like incels probably identified with Diabolik back in the day, though. Like in the movie, Diabolik blows up a tax office. And I feel like
there are literal signs that say like...
It says tax office and it's like blowing up.
It says like tax department, tax information office, income... There's a literal sign that says income tax.
And it's just like blowing up. It's just like exploding. It's a very 1960s countercultural kind of like vibe going on there. It's really funny. When they announce that is happening, it happens like very, very quickly. This is like a movie that has like a pretty tepid pace. Like it doesn't move at like a brief clip like at all. And then all of a sudden the tax office is like exploding. You're like, whoa. And he just did it as like to spite the government, because he basically he's stealing all this money from, I don't know who he's stealing the money from, like the bank. He's stealing the money from the bank and from the government, and this like of this fictional like European like country that he's in or whatever. Yeah. And like, which is like everyone has different accents too. Everyone has varying English accents. The Minister of Finance, that's like my thing too. Is like I feel like the movie, at least the version I watched, is gotta be like dubbed over. No, definitely it's dubbed over, and I think it's just because some of their accents were just too heavy on the shoot day. Yeah, and it's just like noise and stuff like that. Because also it's the '60s. Yeah, and this is Italian filmmaking. They dubbed over everything. Yeah, no, like this whole movie is ADR for sure. Absolutely. But it's interesting because it's like this is a Paramount movie. But it was made like clearly in Europe with like almost like exclusively with European like talent. Was Paramount just distribution then? I think it was just distribution, but that makes sense. But the money was clearly coming from Paramount, because supposedly they call this the only Hollywood picture that Mario Bava ever made. Oh. And Mario Bava, a lot of Hollywood. Right. But he's one of those people they put like on the Mount Rushmore of like classic horror film directors or whatever. It's just right next to Netflix original series. Jeez, don't even get me started on those. But where was I? I can't remember. Oh yeah. So in my estimation, I think like I don't know, like he blows up a tax office. He blows up an entire. It's depicted as like being like a. How many people do you think died in it? Because it's a skyscraper. Right. He blows up a skyscraper, the tax office. You gotta assume it's a lot, but at least the people that were in that room, right? The funny thing though is I don't think any of those people, because none of those people were like important characters. They're not. But they're also not. They're not in the room when we find out about it. because what's his name is there, the detective is there, the inspector who the Zenigata character is there, so they're not in the room when it happens. We just see footage. It just kind of cuts to this building be exploding.
No. The inspector is not in the room, and neither is the minister of finance. The people that are in the room.
So both of them, at least the three of them in that scene, die.
So the three people that are in that scene are the people that are the new guys in that office,
and they're gonna die.
They literally got the job. That's the first scene that some of them are in.
And then they get blown up, and they just die. Diabolik's a pretty bad dude.
I think this is an interesting.
1960s incels loved Diabolik. This is how Timothy McVeigh came up with the Oklahoma City bombing. Which, by the way, I lived in Oklahoma City in 1995, so it's my earliest memory.
Yeah, I was really
millennials have great terrorism memories.
9/11 happened.
Foundational
when I was a baby
terrorisms
or a toddler.
Uh-huh.
So
yeah, he didn't get any of the good terrorism memories.
Yeah,
you're cheated.
Actually, no.
Foundational terrorism
was I alive
experiences.
During that entire anthrax scare with like people mailing anthrax in the mail.
I don't know. Do you remember it or not?
I don't
That's
know.
up to you, man.
My earliest memory is Pokemon Fire Red and getting my red Game Boy Advance SP.
My earliest memory
non-backlit. This is before they had backlit SPs.
We lived about 30 to 40 minutes from the Murrah building bombing in 95. And I remember it probably didn't take much to knock me over, but I remember being knocked out of my seat, eating cereal. And then my mom, I think, thought that it was like, because we felt the shockwave of it. And my mom thought she thought it like an oil derrick nearby had blown up. Because there were like little oil derricks like all around. Like everywhere in Oklahoma City. It was just like the norm back then. Maybe it's still like that. I haven't been in Oklahoma City in like 20 years. But
I think we have some of those like out near the airport.
Yeah, I see them here in LA. I see them here. But that's what the explosion felt like maybe a close, small explosion rather than a far, really big explosion.
Dang.
And but yeah, I don't know. Maybe Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols saw this movie and were like, you know what? ATF's going down. Anyways, the plot of this movie is that this pretty rude dude named Diabolik is like determined to steal all the money from this country.
Just all the money.
All the money.
Just literally all the money.
And he has like a sick lair. It's like pretty cool. He's got a super
bunch
bed.
Of Jags.
Yeah, he's got so many Jaguars. They just keep launching them off cliffs.
You can see his shower and bathroom.
The shower part I thought was pretty interesting. So they have this like opaque thing that hangs in front of them so you can't see them showering naked. But this
also there's just like there's no like door to the bathroom or wall really.
No, they're just like glass.
And then there's just stairs that lead to the next room.
Uh-huh. But it's
almost like a dollhouse.
It feels like a dollhouse for
sure. Or like
sure.
one of those like action figure like Castle Grayskull set play sets.
For sure.
I had one of those.
I really like the production design of this movie actually. It's like very mod. It's very like mid-century. It's like very
I got this really like sense that it's not a single like inspiration or single like leaning Euro spy kind of thing. It's this really homogenous kind of like multinational kind of Euro spy kind of trip thing that's going on.
That's part of what makes it feel so Lupin to me too, though, because Lupin always he's always robbing places in like fictional like European
Dutch,
cities. Yeah, exactly.
Holland, whatever.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like
it's fake France.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a little Italy, a little Netherlands, like a little wink, little nod. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, the the government's like and the inspectors like ideas of how to like keep all their money from getting stolen by this guy are not good.
I think the interesting part about like these characters is that they're clearly written to be comical. Like
yeah, definitely. There's a lot of tongue-in-cheek shit going on.
Yeah, for sure. Like Inspector Jinko, who's played by Michelle Piccoli, is probably more of the serious one of like the government representatives.
Well, he's definitely the most likable, right?
Yeah. But even then, he's still like.
But at least he like comes up with a coherent plan, but they're not good. They're not good.
They're not good, and also he's just there to get like the rug ripped out from him.
Yeah, constantly. He's constantly, yeah.
Like he is just Zenigata.
Yeah, totally. He's like, Lupin, I'm coming to get you. No, it's man, it is.
Which Michel Piccoli, also another very very famous actor.
Yeah, and been like a million things. He was in
French
Belle de
actor
Jour.
and producer. Paul Javal in Contempt, which is a Jean-Luc Godard movie.
I think Piccoli might be in Guard in Contempt as well, actually.
Man, French New Wave, man.
Yeah.
Also, Adolfo Celli was in Thunderball, like 1961 Thunderball. He played Emilio Largo before like they changed who the actor was, and then they changed his name to I think Angelo Largo or something like that. But Emilio Largo is a Spectre agent, so I get like the Bond vibes make sense,
Right.
like a whole lot. Also, he's got this like really elaborate airplane death trap thing where he opens up a like a little panel at the bottom of the air. Also, they shoot a gun in an airplane and they patch the hole with gum.
Yeah, I like
which
that.
I
thought that part was really funny.
I thought it was so.
Well, that was another Bond thing for me too, though, because like in Goldfinger, right?
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah. And Goldfinger's like a few years before this.
Yeah, which definitely makes sense. And Thunderball was also before this, so it makes perfect sense.
But he also gets covered in gold in this too. So
right.
I was getting a lot of Goldfinger vibes.
Honestly, I like the getting covered in gold in this more
better.
Than gold. This one was
agree.
so sick.
Yeah.
At how he got covered in gold and like he's just a statue now, and I'm like, that's insanely cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool actually.
How.
And like the statue they built of him that's like him covered in gold is like actually pretty cool looking.
I'm just thinking like
production design's pretty good.
It's insanely cool. I'm thinking like they created like the statue, right? And they created like a translucent slot for him to just put his face. Right. Right. His head and
like, hey, But I really like is the weird golden shower scene before that where he's like peeing gold into like the buckets.
Because like he melted the gold down, right?
Yeah, he's melting gold down to make smaller bars of it. The reason he has to melt the gold down to make smaller bars of it, because like they basically the government comes up with like 3 pretty significant
genius plan.
They're really bad ideas. So the first idea is like they're moving money from one place to another, and they said it's the most amount of money ever moved at one time. And of course, Diabolik's gonna try and get it. So they send like a decoy where they like put a bunch of fake money like on like a but of course he finds out about like the real money, and the real money is being driven around by a bunch of guys who are dressed like the Monopoly man for some reason.
Because of course.
And they're in a Rolls Royce. They're in a the Monopoly man in a Rolls Royce was somehow the decoy. Or is like think about it. Like they're like, oh, we don't want someone to get robbed, so let's dress them up like Daddy Warbucks from fucking Annie. You know what I mean? Like this is like very confusing plan.
All right, guys. We gotta be as subtle as possible.
Exactly. We'll send Daddy Warbucks in it, and the Monopoly guy in a Rolls Royce to the docks.
Honestly,
which is just the docks.
All
just the docks.
of their plans suck.
They're very bad. The other one is like they don't want him to steal a necklace, so they tell the woman who wears a necklace to make sure she leaves it out on the table.
The only security for it is a single video camera.
Is a camera, and they're like, aha.
With a live stream.
What I really love about that was that at the time in 1968, clearly the idea of having like a live video feed was like pretty impressive.
And at this point in time, we're just like, you have only one camera in the room.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the crazy part about it is he takes a picture of the room and then covers that picture in front of the camera so that they can't see that like the
And then they say, hey, what was that? And then they just stare at the screen as if like they're gonna get answered. Why don't you just go check the room?
Yeah, I don't know. But the camera that he takes that Polaroid with, I have that camera.
Oh, that's so sick.
It's a big, crazy old Polaroid camera. I don't have any film for it, so I have no idea if it works, but I do have that camera.
I will say this: the Minister of Finance, I think that's just his name, Minister of Finance.
Yeah,
it's played by Terry Thomas, who is a very famous English character actor.
Yeah, he plays a silly, foppish English person in every project ever.
Like he is just he's famous for his portrayal of like the disreputable upper crust or upper class like members of society, or like the hoity-toity, like
because he has like this perfect gap-toothed grin,
right? Which is I think his portrayal of that is kind of more ingrained into the public like psychology or public consciousness more than I guess Terry Thomas himself, because he was much more internationally famous during his time than he is today. But we definitely still draw upon like that kind of idea of the upper class portrayal, which leads me to my point that Kojima was right. Memes. It's all memes. Memes are the DNA of the human soul.
There's a lot of memes. I would say, I mean, we've talked about a bunch of memes. The gentleman thief is a meme.
Exactly.
Right?
And like I think Diabolik is just another proof of that, because like nothing is truly created in a vacuum.
No, that's true.
Except for like, the Pakistani Tekken scene, I guess.
Whoa.
But, clearly like inspiration shifts and was passed along. And definitely I can see things like I can see Austin Powers being inspired by stuff in Diabolik.
Oh, totally.
And I definitely
But the crazy thing about it though is that I don't, this movie, it doesn't exist in a vacuum either. And there's lots of like 60s like spy movies, like the most famous of which are Bond, right? But like there's other ones, and like,
you know what I immediately thought when I saw them rolling around in the money and having sex is the Pierce Brosnan and Halle Berry doing that in The Diamonds and Tomorrow Never Die, or
one of the bad Brosnan movies.
I don't know. I kind of like it because like it has the most interesting plot. It's like
is that the one with like the with the guy with the
it's about the North Korean guy that gets plastic surgery to become a white dude and then infiltrates like the British Empire as this philanthropist. He's like pretty much just Elon Musk.
Oh yeah, the Elon Musk guy. So wait a minute, that guy is okay. He's played by a British actor, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But in the
story, he's actually North Korean.
Yeah, he's actually a North Korean dude that got plastic surgery because James Bond blew up when like he was in North Korea in the opening scene. We could talk about this at one point. I love the Bond movies, even the terrible ones.
I love the Bond movies as well. The bad Brosnan movies to me are really bad, but like, cause like, is that the same one where he like kites around?
Die Another Day. That's what it's called. Yes, he surfs in
that one's horrible.
Arctic Circle.
Yeah, that one's horrible. Also, he drives a BMW. It's terrible. Here's the thing, GoldenEye rules.
He has the invisible Aston Martin.
GoldenEye rules, but the other Brosnan movies are really bad.
They drift on the snow because like the Aston Martin has like snow, like spiked tires or something like that. Like this is like the most I think teched out Aston Martin. Like it does everything.
Of course, they got so ridiculous with the gadgets in the later Brosnan movies.
Which I think this is like Diabolik is like an evil James Bond with like grounded gadgets. I feel like. Because he doesn't really use that many gadgets.
He climbs a wall and he does it so slowly that it's a miracle no one just turned around and just saw him climbing up it.
Well, he was camouflaged.
He was wearing gray and white instead of black.
Yeah, he was camouflaged. Which for a master of disguise, he doesn't wear a lot of disguises.
Not in this movie. Supposedly in the comics, he's like someone who like makes masks of people or has some really good masks and like becomes these other people or these other characters. But he definitely doesn't. He kind of, I guess he does that when he picks up what's his name's ashes. Yeah. He picks up the drug lord's ashes.
Yeah.
And he stole these emeralds, the ones from the necklace, and he loads them into a gun and shoots them into this guy's body, and then later recovers them from his ashes.
Which is a very convoluted method of just doing anything.
This movie is full of that.
He fakes his own death like halfway through.
I think he fakes his death twice.
Well, technically, I guess because at the end he's not dead, right?
Yeah. This guy is constantly faking his death.
Like
the next big plan that the government has to like stop him from stealing all the money. So here's the thing: he steals a bunch of money, and then to like stop, I don't know. They.
You know what I can totally see?
What?
Like Diabolik being inspirations to like contemporary Batman lore.
Oh, really? Like how?
I kind of get like Batman because like Batman, like this is introduced. I think like
I wish Batman had the guts to blow up the tax office. That'd be more interesting.
I think like more in Neil Adams' run, which is like in the 60s and the 70s, like the idea that Bruce Wayne was also this master of disguise was introduced to this character, that he created these can create these elaborate masks and like makeup and stuff like that, and he created another alternate criminal persona known as Matches Malone, and that's something that's actually like really drawn back upon in like Batman Year One by Frank Miller, which you say what you will about Frank Miller, but Year One is actually a decently good Batman story.
I like Year One. I think Year One's really cool.
Yeah, like the idea that he uses disguises in order as a method of subterfuge and stuff like that. And Diabolik being this master chemist, this like again, nothing's created in a vacuum. I'm pretty sure Batman may have been inspirations for Diabolik for in some sorts of characters, and Diabolik being inspirations for Batman and other sorts of characteristics. But it's just interesting how like this guy is like a master disguise character, and then all of a sudden like those characteristics kind of show up in like next generation of Batman comics.
Sure.
I don't know. I think it's an interesting like kind of little.
Well, didn't we talk about another character though in another movie that like wears people's faces and has masks?
Oh man, did we? Lady Snowblood and
yeah, she just be wearing masks all the time too.
She's a master of making masks. And in the movie, the bad guy also has a life mask.
Yeah,
which maybe it was just a thing to do in the 60s.
Well, I don't know. A lot of stories like to pivot around that though, because like the Mission Impossible movies like constantly have them like 3D printing masks,
right?
And then Game of Thrones, just people are just like constantly just like, ha, it was me, and like they take the mask off and they shrink like 4 inches, like ha. I was wearing heels. But yeah, their last big plan, the government's last big plan, so he blows up the tax office, and then all of the people refuse to pay taxes. They go on TV to ask everyone to pay.
Finance goes on TV, and then he's like, "Okay,
please
guys,
pay your taxes."
A little thing happened. It's not a big deal.
All of our records of your taxes are gone.
So we're gonna go by the honor system.
Yeah, he says. Yeah, he's like, just pay whatever you think you owe,
and we're gonna.
And I love their shots of people watching it on TV, and they're just like, "What the fuck
is this guy?"
Like, there's no way I'm giving you money. No, I love it. And then their plan is they're gonna take this big amount. So they need to. God. So they get a bunch of gold together. And what they're going to do with the gold is somehow they're going to use the gold to get a bunch of cash to infuse into the country because the country's running out of money because no one's paying their taxes and because Diabolik has stolen so much money.
So if I remember correctly, how it's working or how they explain it is they're getting cash from another like ambiguous like other European nation or
sure.
like ally or whatever. But they have to remove their gold from like their existing economy because, the money was stolen. So there's nothing to.
Yeah, they don't have any money. Oh my god, which is crazy because it's like
because it's 68 because it's still gold standard, right?
The fiduciary responsibilities of the financial like leadership of this country is
questionable.
Yeah, highly questionable. So somehow what their plan is they're like, well, if we have all the gold, it's going to be too easy for Diabolik to steal all the gold from the country. So what we should do is to melt it into one big gold, one really, really big gold.
Solid, one
thing.
Solid.
So if, their idea is that it would be harder to steal all of the gold from the country if it's in one solid gold block. And so they make the biggest, and it's like the size of it's like a train cart size block of gold. And their idea is that somehow if they put all the gold in one place and put it all together, it'll be harder. It'll somehow... Well, no, it falls in the ocean. They're not putting it in the ocean. They're trying to transmit it. They're trying to move it. And then he blows up the bridge, and then it falls into the ocean.
Okay, got it.
And the reason it's on the bridge is because he blocks where they were trying to go before. Because he knocks a car. He drops another car off a cliff. There's a lot of cars going over cliffs. But then they have to like move the train back out through this like tunnel, and then it's being rerouted over this bridge. He blows up the bridge and it falls into the water, and then he fills he floats the giant gold back to his lair, and they use that to track down his lair, which actually maybe would have been a good plan all along if it hadn't actually been the gold, right? But it actually was the gold, so he did get the gold.
And then they don't get the gold back either.
Well, they kind of do. But it's just going to be really hard to get all of it back because now it's like because he golden showers it all over his lair.
Yeah.
So there's this sequence where he's like now has to melt down the gold, and he's like peeing. He's like, yeah, and he's like peeing gold into these like
drainage vents.
Yeah, so that he can make smaller gold bars because one big gold is like not a good gold.
And then the cops show up.
And then the cops show up while he's doing his golden shower.
And they start blowing the shit out.
And they blow up the gold. And the gold which is being melted down, like explodes everywhere. And then he gets frozen in gold.
But like he's still wearing like his gear, which is apparently
which he claims allows him to walk through the center of the sun.
Which I don't know if he's been to the sun.
I don't know if he knows that much about the sun.
Maybe he went at night. Who knows?
Definitely. He definitely went to the sun at night.
He went at night.
Yeah, he went.
While the sun was asleep.
Exactly.
And he took 50 million lions with it.
Oh my god. Anyways, I just love that though. The idea is they did all the work of bringing all the gold together for him, and then they turned it into one big gold
for him to steal. Nice.
It's like the best.
Genius.
It's the best logic.
Absolutely genius.
It's the best logic in the history of cinema. I love it so much. But anyways, he gets melted into the gold, and his like girlfriend comes, and she's like so sad. And she's, by the way, her outfits the entire movie are amazing. All of the women are highly objectified in this movie, but holy shit, do they look cool? They look really, really cool. There's just one.
Honestly, everyone has like a kind of iconic look.
Yeah.
Like, even Diabolik himself has some fits that
he got some weird leather daddy shit going on.
Not just that, but like his trench coat and turtleneck combo.
True. It's true.
With his like very like square kind of like Italian glasses.
Yeah, his glasses are cool.
Yeah.
No, it's like everybody looks really cool, but like even like the drug lord, he has like these kind of like these like floozies, you know what I mean?
Just hanging out in his
but they have like really cool outfits. Like one of them has like a top that's like made out of like, and I'm sure at the time would have been kind of futuristic. It's like made out of like plastic.
Yeah.
It's kind of like chain mailed together. And they have like this really cool machine that like helps them like identify people, and they like use it to like come up with what Ava like looks like. Because like one of the girls had like seen her before and like uses the machine to like positively identify her, and they end up kidnapping her basically. And
they track her down to her massage parlor?
No, they track her down to her doctor.
Oh, I thought she was getting a massage though.
I'm not sure. She gets injured somehow, and it's a really nondescript injury. But he goes to like Diabolik goes to hug her, and she like winces, and he's like, "You have to go to the doctor." But they had already found her doctor, and like we're interrogating him, and we're like, "Hey, we know who this is." And as soon as they know. He was like seemed like he was gonna help them, but then they mentioned Diabolik, and he's like, because he gets scared because he's afraid Diabolik.
I'm not messing with that guy.
Yeah, exactly. Because everyone on Earth is afraid of Diabolik because he's capable of stealing all the money on the planet. And
he can steal anything.
I do love that he like financially ruins like an entire country through his thieving.
Who do you think would win in a thief off, him or Danny Ocean?
I don't know. Danny Ocean might have his match met. Depends on if people in this universe have the logic of the people in this universe, or
because remember, Danny Ocean also destroyed a building.
Yeah, does he?
Yeah, in Ocean's the
13? Second one or the third one?
Yeah, Ocean's 13 with Al Pacino. Have you never seen? Did you see?
I've seen all of them, but I don't remember much of any of them. Although I've seen the first one recently.
In Ocean's 13, Danny's plan is to create an artificial earthquake to use the hotel that Al Pacino owns as a tuning fork to destroy it.
Okay. They?
And they do.
And they destroy the building.
Yeah. So, if anything, Danny Ocean
also a terrorist.
Is also a terrorist, but maybe on the same power level as Diabolik.
Yeah. I don't know, but Diabolik's main power, I feel like, is that as soon as other people are dealing with him, they're incapable of logic.
Yeah. Because, like, also, remember when they jump, they kidnap Ava, and then he comes to the plane, and then he gets in the plane with the bad
love
guys.
this part, by the way. This is, like, my favorite part of the movie.
And, like, I'm just like, why don't you just fucking... You're not going to tie him up. Not gonna.
No. Well, their plan. So they show you earlier in the movie, and he's clearly aware of this as well. Like Diabolik gets onto the plane knowing that they drop people out of the plane.
Yeah.
So he gets onto the plane. What's really interesting though is like he didn't know they were going to give him a parachute. So he shows up without one, which is weird. But they do give him one.
Yeah.
And then he puts a bomb on the bottom of the plane
using a magnet.
And then when they drop him out of the plane, he grabs the drug lord and he pulls him out of the plane with him. And then they're falling, and then he blows up the plane with all the money that he stole. By the way, it seems that he actually brought the money. I kept thinking that the money was going to show up later, and he didn't actually bring the money.
He cares about the money.
He doesn't care about the money.
More of the art of the crime.
Yeah, because he blows up all the money. All the money that he stole from the Monopoly guys at the beginning of the movie is on that plane when he blows it up.
Which leads me to like believe he's not like this Diabolik is not like the moral Robin Hood Diabolik of like later arcs in the 900 volume.
But what I think is really interesting about that is that both he and Lupin go through that same process throughout the years, where they become like blue suited, like Hayao Miyazaki
kind of
good, like Robin Hood Heart of Gold kind of characters. Right. They start out as these like heartless kind of jackasses, like because early Lupin's like pretty mean.
He's a dick.
He's pretty mean, and this guy kills a lot of people.
Yeah.
Diabolik kills a lot of people.
He does Robin Hood,
He does a terrorism. He steals all the money in an entire country.
Which is
but the best part about it is that a lot of it he loses.
Yeah, I mean he doesn't care.
He does get the emeralds back, so he is getting some stuff.
I think it's money is money because I think it's just like they can
shenanigans.
It's shenanigans to him.
That's hijinks. He just likes really good hijinks.
Yeah.
He just wants to launch as many cars off of cliffs as he can.
Yeah.
And whatever time he has alive.
He has a million Jags. What is he gonna do with all these Jags?
I thought it was really funny that they kept pointing out like, oh, it's a black Jag. They're like, well, we're gonna get you.
I think what is crazy too is like out of nowhere the threat of rape is real for Ava.
Oh, that's right.
When she's like kidnapped, and I'm like, they didn't give her any clothes. Did they take her on the bed?
She's in like a burlap sack, like on a bed. That part's so brief, I almost forgot about it.
Yeah, and it kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's this dude that's just like staring at her, smoking a cigarette,
and then he starts rubbing the cigarette along her body, like the embers of the cigarette. He starts like rubbing along her skin,
and I'm just like, where the fuck did this come from?
It's a pretty weird scene.
And then Diabolik just comes out of nowhere and just immediately like cuts the guy.
Yeah, he just kills him and is like, hey, that's my girlfriend. Get out of here. But that sequence, so he's like falling from the plane and he's got the drug lord with him and he judo chops him like right before they hit the ground, so the guy is pretty much knocked unconscious as soon as they land.
Yeah. And
then he later shoots the guy 11 times, and then later like the guy the inspector's like 11 shots, like that's how many gems there were on the necklace. And then somehow he modified those bullets to shoot him with the
somehow. But those are like, the gems are like this big too.
They're huge. They're way bigger than a submachine gun bullet.
And like the bullet he pulls out is like this big. I'm like, what?
And then later, he and Ava are like back at like the bachelor pad getting swanky.
Which they know where they're at that point.
There's another sequence though, so where they're like having sex like in the tub. He like it's like a pool. They have like a pool, like a swimming pool of some kind. I don't know. Maybe it's connected to the ocean. We don't really know how they get in and out of this place. But he sticks all the gems to her like chest, like as if she's wearing the necklace.
Yeah.
And then they just go swimming. Presumably they're just gonna fall off
and sink to the bottom. Hopefully it doesn't get drained away.
He really doesn't care about the money. That's all I'm saying.
Hey man, he's got his.
Some people just want to see the world burn.
He's got his cave. That's.
He doesn't even have his cave though, because by the end of the movie, they know where it is. He's gonna have to make a new cave.
That's true, but who cares? It seems
he doesn't care.
It seems like it's really easy for this guy to do this stuff.
Yeah, it really is easy for this guy to do this stuff. Like the part where he sticks the picture in like the candle so that it like holds up in front of the camera. So they can't see that he's moved the necklace. Oh my god! There's another part also where he takes his costume off. So he's like running around naked for a while because he Yeah. So he takes off his costume and puts it. I don't know why they have this, but like the castle, which is like, this is another very Lupin moment for me. The castle has like some, what do you call those? Like where it shoots rocks?
Catapult?
Like, yeah, he has a catapult. There's a catapult at the castle, and they're gonna get him. So he takes off his costume and launches his costume with the catapult.
Okay.
And they're like, "Oh no, he's going!" And so they shoot at the costume in the air. And then they go down to like where the costume landed to try and like find him.
It's just a costume.
And it's just the costume. Like, no. And I mean, he was like running.
They deserve it.
And he's like been running around naked.
At this point,
He's escaped and
maybe these
naked.
guys deserve to get fucked with by Diabolik.
But it's pretty crazy because like that's all the money from the entire country. At least that's the way that like here's the thing. It sounds like I'm just saying that, but they really do specify.
They literally say
that the country's out of money. And now no one's paying taxes, and that's why they have to make the world's largest single gold block. And then they seal it shut, and then they put it on a train.
Another thing would add is costumes in this are really good.
Yeah, they're good. They're really good.
Like, sometimes I forget that this movie was made in the 60s because it doesn't look like a 60s film. At first glance, I would argue earliest be like 70s, like early 70s or something like that. I could see it being like a mid 70s feature, just being like a really, really cheap one.
Yeah.
But man, talk about pretty comic accurate, if anything.
And I think that the movie gets like a lot of respect for like how Bava basically created like a kind of a mixture of what is kind of like a 60s like spy movie that feels like a comic book.
Right.
I think that it probably I think it's actually not unfair to compare it to Lady Oscar because it's like a really, really early comic book to live action adaptation.
Right.
This one I actually think that does more like Lady Oscar does it in her costume and it does it like in certain things, but it's really shot basically more just like a period piece from like the late 70s. This movie is shot like the shots are lined up to make it kind of look comic booky. There'll be shots where a person will enter frame and it'll just be just like their face and then like things behind them. Especially there's a lot of like kind of like eyebrow work because he's obviously wearing like a mask for a lot of the movie.
Very interesting like lens work. Concave or convex lenses that make that like fisheye kind of effect.
There's some of that too, but like in general, like the movie also does a lot of silly 60s visual images. It does a lot of like really rapid like focus racks, or like it'll like zoom in on someone. Like someone will be like up in a window being like, what the hell happened down there? And it'll like zoom up into them like, and like
I
some
think
like
it's so
Wes
funny
Anderson
that you
shit.
like 60s visual like language because like I think this is the movie that he's either in or inspired the Body Movin' music video.
Really?
Yeah, like the Eurobeat, like body moving.
Yeah, I don't know that music video, but that makes sense. Wait, what movie? What song are you talking about?
It's Body Moving. It's a Eurobeat song. I'm pretty. I think
from Initial D.
No.
Okay, it's just another Eurobeat song.
Just another Eurobeat song.
Okay.
I'll show it to you later.
All right. Cool. But yeah, no, I don't know. There's a lot of things, especially like in the way that the layer is like organized too. There are many frames that feel taken from a comic book. Mm-hmm. Like there's just the sequence where he's opening the so he has like a what do you call that? He has a safe.
Yeah.
And the way that that's shot, it's really interesting. There's like some interesting like machinery in the way it's shot. Like there's things that are obscuring the focus and the image of something, and he's in the background. You know what? And the foreground has
I totally
things in
get
front
what
of
you're
it.
saying because like you got a like medium shot of them getting out of the car.
Yeah.
And then you got the kind of close up shot of Ava in the shower, and then you get the wide shot of the base itself. So essentially you got like 3 panels set up like right there.
No, totally.
Yeah.
But I was thinking even after that, but while she's in the shower, but he's messing with the
No, yeah, like essentially there's like smaller panel like
yes.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's this one in particular where there's like a bunch I can't tell what the machinery is in front of him, but there's things in the foreground of the image that are obscuring him in a way that's very specifically looks.
It's like a laboratory kind of setup, like kind of enshrouded kind of stuff. I don't know how to really explain it other than to like, you know.
There's like stuff in the way, and it looks like a panel from a comic book.
Yeah.
And the movie does this in a way that I don't really see a lot of movies doing this again until like, you know, the early 2000s, you know, actually trying to replicate like maybe on occasion, especially like the Batman, the live action Batmans from the 80s and the early 90s, like the Burton movies will do it for scenic shots. They'll do it for shots of the city, right? The matte paintings, like the cities, like the landscapes will be very comic booky. But then when you get into like it's the mediums and the closest, it becomes very just like Hollywood film stuff.
Yeah, it's very much a film language,
right? But this one, I think maybe is trying a little bit harder to like look kind of like a comic book through photography, and that then becomes like the goal of movies like 300 and like Sin City and stuff like that. So to see them attempt that as early as they did is pretty ambitious and pretty interesting. And there's not much to work with because there's really no movies that have done this before that. So yeah, I'm particularly impressed by that because it's a movie standing on the shoulders of nothing in that regard. There's not really movies already trying to do that. So yeah, interesting. An interesting start to a conversation, I'd say. It's a conversation that's still ongoing, right? Where people are still finding new ways to like make shots look even more like a comic book than before.
Which is, I mean, I think in the modern age is definitely like the leaning into the digital effects,
right?
Of like messing with frames and like, you know, post-production editing in order to take one shot and then essentially just splice it with another shot, or you pause that frame, literally rotate it or something like that. Now it's like off to the corner and then the new scene occurs or whatever.
Right.
Or it's like visually speaking, we're just more capable just
doing it in post, and you can just do everything in post right now.
Yeah.
But that being also said though, it's like there's
in this case like they had to do it like
just with a camera. Yeah, practically. Yeah, totally. And you know, modern movies also they try to like flatten colors and things like that to try and create a comic booky feel. And this one does kind of have a comic booky feel, but it's all done just through the way that the costumes are done and through the way that it's shot. And I am impressed, especially budget wise, on like the lair, because this movie at moments very much looks like a Bond film, but it's like clearly not quite a Bond film.
I will say you can see the limitations in their green screen effects that I think that are going on. Something going on in the background.
Oh, you mean every time they're driving a car, it becomes very 60s like car interior.
Yeah.
Where there's like clearly a screen going on and they're driving, but it's cool though because they composite with really nice like exterior like running footage of the cars like on these beautiful scenic highways as well.
It's not just very visually obvious.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, it screams.
It's just a limitation of the technology at the time, and it's just like more of a historical like.
But to me, I will say that like that gives me just like the Turner Classic Movies as vibes.
Yeah.
For me, it's very nostalgic.
Like North by Northwest.
Yeah. You know, or just anything really. It's like friggin' The Star Is Born, you know, like Judy Garland. It's like every time anybody's in a car back in the day, it's like some screen behind them with a projection, like a rear projection screen thing. And you know, there's a certain level of nostalgia to it. I think people even still do it in weird ways pretty recently. Like I saw people were talking about all of the shots. So they shot the movie Eyes Wide Shut in London. Mm-hmm. But it takes place in New York,
right? So they use a projection screen, and Tom Cruise is walking on a treadmill,
right?
Yeah, and
you've seen this as well.
It looks pretty seamless.
It looks cool.
Yeah, no,
but there's something nostalgic about it. I almost feel like they went perfectly seamless on that one, where they will have certain color lights like walk past him based on the kinds of storefronts he's walking past. So they're going really, really into extreme ordinary level of detail to make it so you don't notice that he's doing it. But I feel like even if they did let you notice, it'd still be cool.
No, absolutely.
Because it's nostalgic.
Yeah, not just that, but also, isn't that the whole point of movies? the whole fabrication of it all.
Yeah. Like you enjoy the artifice, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, isn't the whole point that they were able to fabricate it, like even making it even more enjoyable or like more meritable?
Yeah, like noticing the details, noticing the work.
Right.
Certainly. I feel that way about matte paintings in particular, for sure. But it's really interesting too, because people complain about the all the CG in the Star Wars prequels. And I think rightfully so, because a lot of it is really not quite there.
Right.
But I do think that part of what when you're looking at that stuff, what you're not noticing is like how much practical stuff they did make. I noticed, there's a lot of, especially like 2 and 3, where they clearly just shot it like in a green box,
blue room,
right? But there's like in the first one, I do think that there's like they made a lot of assets and they made a lot of physical stuff. Maybe
not the droid and Gungan battle and the Windows XP.
Yeah, the Windows XP
default.
Where they fight. Yeah, my God. But Jar Jar won an entire battle by himself, dude. Come on.
He's a Jar Jar Binks.
You saw our Jar Jar Binks. I agree. Anyways, like this movie, definitely not one of the best 500 best movies ever made, though.
I don't think so.
Empire,
I think,
you're crazy.
You know what? I think
you're
individually
crazy.
We could create a list of 500 movies, and this movie would probably not show up on there.
Definitely not. I still thought it was cool, though.
It's definitely an interesting flick.
Yeah.
It's more of a novelty film, I feel
like.
It's
definitely kind of novelty. But I feel like it so perfectly touches on like weird little things that have been running
It
themes
did
for
make
us.
me interested in the other adaptations of Diabolik.
Yeah.
Like it's like the newer trilogy that started in 2021 or 2020 or something like that.
I will say I have some level of skepticism about that movie.
You mentioned that the actor, the main guy who plays Diabolik, changed between the first and the second film. And the third one is still not yet to release, even though it was supposed to come out this year, which is not necessarily a...
These are concerns.
It's not necessarily the best sign. There's also an animated series from like the 2000s.
Really?
Yeah, and a live action series from 2012.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is, potentially interesting.
Well, we'll definitely talk about Lupin in the future for sure. I'd love me some Lupin. So.
And honestly, so when you first brought this topic to me, I thought I was like, oh, what a coincidence, because it's not that I've like read Diabolik. I'm more of just like aware of it, or very much aware of it. So Diabolik is kind of attributed to this new wave of Italian comics called Fermente Nero or Fermente Neri or something like that.
Yeah.
Which just literally translates to black comics.
Right. I read a little bit about this in preparation for this, but keep going.
It's essentially like the major wave of crime-centric, horror-centric, or exploitative comic books.
Yeah.
Within Italy. And
what's funny though is this is not an exploit movie.
It's not really.
No.
There's like one scene that is potentially exploitative. I mean, you can argue that it's financially exploitative.
Well, what I mean though is that like there's nothing about this movie that is going to shock you and send you home to like tell people about this one crazy scene.
Dude,
like,
she
nobody's cutting their tongue off. Nobody's getting hung from hooks. You know what I mean? Like
no absolutely insane sexual assault or anything. Like the threat of sexual assault is ended almost as immediately as it begins.
Well, and even like the sexy scene, the one that Catherine would have possibly objected to, is not like they easily could have shot that without her being fully naked.
Yeah.
Like
she could have just
they're covered in so much money that you have no idea whether they're wearing clothes or not.
Lingerie.
Yeah.
Like under there. No one would have fucking cared.
No one would have noticed or known. This movie does have a lot of makeout scenes though, which I think is kind of funny.
Which, maybe to just
people need to bring back the makeout scene. Sex scenes are so passe. We need the makeout scene.
Is that your American sex negative sensibilities coming through? No sex, only kissing.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know. I just think that like I want it to be sexy, right? I want it to be sexy, and I think that like whatever they're doing now, like I think that, like we can talk about it now finally. But Oppenheimer is a really sex negative movie. And I feel like when I look around at what the depictions of sexuality are in especially modern Hollywood cinema, it is very not positive. And it's like Hollywood television as well, right? It's funny because there's more people talk about how many useless sex scenes are just shoved into projects like all the time. Like Game of Thrones is just like full of basically arbitrary useless sex scenes, but they're not sexy. It's
not.
really not sexy. It's really not attractive, and mostly it's really negative. You know, like you never ever
It's usually
see.
rape.
It's almost always rape.
Yeah.
It's almost always rape. And if it's not rape,
It's coercive.
It's yeah. There's something else negative or shitty about it, or just
coercive or transactional.
Yeah.
Like
it's just and just like in a way that's just like specifically like shows you that like at least one of the characters is like not having fun, is like not having a good time. I think it would be cool if make out or sex or otherwise, people included those as moments that exist between characters that were positive, even if the rest of the world around them is really negative. That could be a positive thing. And I think that like moments of intimacy between people, like, you know what I mean, like they exist because they're positive for us. Like we do them and we engage in them with the people that we care about most. So yeah, I'm even whether it's a sex scene or a makeout scene, I think we could include those things in stories about people's lives without like relying on them to be like, you know, like a place so that we can fridge a character to like motivate plot development, you know.
right.
You're with me, I'm with me. So what was your favorite scene from this movie? What if you have like one thing you would point out about this movie you really liked?
Okay, honestly, I was gonna say the tax building blowing up, but I feel like it's an easy cop out. Him getting covered or the reveal of the gold, like him stuck in gold, that was like really, really cool in my opinion. But honestly, the opening chase scene in the car where like it keeps cutting from his mask, it's a very interesting shot composition. It's very classic Bond action, but also like you say, there's that comic book layout because you have the bird's eye helicopter view, which is essentially your open or wide panel shot, and then you have close-ups to just his eyes in the car, and then like the wider him like just POV of him driving on the road, and that's more of a medium shot and stuff like that. That entire like sequence that's going down is just it's very, especially for an opening, it kind of like gets you sold almost immediately.
Yeah, no, I like it. I think it's pretty good. I really like them, like the super bed and all the money. I think it just looks cool. I think it's just like
that was like one of the most visually interesting.
It's iconic.
Yeah,
it's like an iconically like. I would say that visually, even though this whole movie isn't as visually iconic as maybe some of the other things we've seen, I think that shot and that sequence is as visually iconic as anything we've talked about in any other movies we've watched.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, to me, that's my fave.
I mean, in my opinion, even if you have one shot that is like just like absolutely iconic, and that's the only thing that gets referenced for the rest of like that entire movie's like lifespan or whatever, or for as long as that movie remains in the public consciousness, then you still kind of succeeded.
You still did something pretty good.
You've planted the seeds of a meme, essentially.
You created a meme.
Yeah, which is like kind of what this movie is.
I for sure would steal that shot. I think it's really good. I don't know what story would ever necessitate it. I can't imagine another character bankrupting an entire country by himself.
Just like Scrooge McDuck.
Yeah, it's definitely on some Scrooge McDuck shit for sure. Definitely some DuckTales going on. All right, well, I'm all tapped out on this one.
I am as well. I guess. Thanks for anyone still sticking around. Thanks for watching. Catch us next time. Bye-bye.